Today, we are going to talk about one of the most important figures not only in the history of the United States, but in the history of democracy itself. When people think of America, they often think of freedom, opportunity, and the belief that anyone, no matter where they come from, can rise to greatness. These ideals did not appear overnight. They were shaped by struggle, sacrifice, and the difficult decisions of leaders who carried the weight of an entire nation on their shoulders. At the center of one of America's darkest and most defining moments stood a man whose life story continues to inspire millions around the world. His name was Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln is remembered as one of the greatest leaders in American history, a man whose name has become a symbol of freedom, unity, and perseverance. His face is carved into stone, printed on currency, and spoken of with reverence across generations. School children learn his name early, monuments honor his memory, and historians continue to study his words and decisions. Yet behind the monuments and history books was a deeply human man, shaped by hardship, repeated failure, personal loss, inner darkness, and extraordinary moral courage. This is the complete story of Abraham Lincoln, told not just as the story of a president, but as the story of a man who rose from nothing, faced unbearable pressure, and changed the course of America forever. Abraham Lincoln was born on February 12, 1809, in a small one-room log cabin in Hardin County, Kentucky. His family lived in extreme poverty. There were no luxuries, no stable income, and no sense of security about the future. Survival depended on hard physical labor and the mercy of nature. His father, Thomas Lincoln, was a hard-working but struggling farmer and carpenter who owned little land and had limited education. His mother, Nancy Hanks Lincoln, was known for her intelligence, kindness, and strong moral beliefs. In a rough and unforgiving world, she became the emotional center of young Abraham's life, teaching him empathy, honesty, and compassion. Life on the American frontier was harsh and unforgiving. Winters were long and bitterly cold. Summers were exhausting and dangerous. Illness spread easily, and medical care was almost non-existent. When Abraham was only 9 years old, tragedy struck in a way that would shape him forever. His mother died from milk sickness, a deadly illness caused by poisoned milk from cows that grazed on toxic plants. Her death left a deep emotional wound. Lincoln would later say that everything good he was, or ever hoped to be, he owed to his mother. Losing her at such a young age created a quiet sadness in him that never fully disappeared. Education was a luxury that Lincoln could not afford. Schools were rare, teachers were scarce, and books were difficult to obtain. In total, Abraham Lincoln attended formal school for less than 1 year, yet his desire to learn was relentless. He borrowed books whenever possible, sometimes walking miles just to read a few pages. He read the Bible, Aesop's Fables, Shakespeare, and the Declaration of Independence. These books shaped his language, his moral reasoning, and his understanding of justice. After long days of exhausting physical labor, he would sit alone at night, reading by firelight or candlelight, determined to educate himself in a world that offered him no advantages. As a young man, Lincoln worked tirelessly at whatever jobs he could find. He split wood, worked on farms, served as a store clerk, and worked on riverboats that traveled along America's waterways. None of these jobs brought financial stability or comfort. In his early 20s, Lincoln attempted to run a small business, believing it could provide a better future. The business failed completely, leaving him deeply in debt. It took him many years to repay what he owed, and during this period, he experienced profound emotional pain. Lincoln suffered from severe depression. Friends described him as withdrawn, deeply reflective, and burdened by sadness. At times, those close to him feared for his mental health. Yet even in his darkest moments, Lincoln refused to surrender to despair. Instead of giving up, he turned inward, strengthening his mind and character. He began studying law on his own, reading legal books late into the night, with intense focus. Without attending law school, Abraham Lincoln became a lawyer through discipline, intelligence, and relentless effort. As a lawyer, he gained a reputation for fairness, honesty, and moral integrity. He often refused cases he believed were unjust, even when money was desperately needed. People trusted him, and his reputation spread across Illinois. This integrity earned him the nickname Honest Abe, a name that followed him for the rest of his life. Lincoln entered politics not driven by hunger for power, but by a belief in justice, democracy, and equality before the law. His early political career was filled with disappointment. He lost elections, faced public ridicule, and was often dismissed by wealthy elites who saw him as uneducated and unpolished. But Lincoln believed deeply that government should serve the people, not the powerful. Each failure strengthened his determination. He learned from defeat, refined his ideas, and grew stronger with every setback. During this time, slavery was tearing the United States apart. It was the defining moral issue of the era. Lincoln personally believed slavery was wrong, but he also understood how deeply divided the nation was. He feared that reckless action could destroy the Union completely. His position was careful but firm. He opposed the expansion of slavery and believed that a nation could not survive, half slave and half free. His debates with Stephen Douglas brought him national attention. Unlike many politicians of his time, Lincoln spoke plainly and thoughtfully, using logic, empathy, and moral reasoning rather than anger or hatred. Americans across the country began listening. In 1860, against all expectations, Abraham Lincoln was elected the 16th President of the United States. His victory shocked the nation. Southern states saw his election as a direct threat to their way of life, even though he promised not to interfere with slavery where it already existed. Within months, several Southern states seceded from the Union. The United States of America stood on the edge of collapse. The Civil War that followed became the bloodiest conflict in American history. Brother fought brother. Families were torn apart. Cities burned. Economies collapsed, and hundreds of thousands of lives were lost. Lincoln faced unimaginable pressure from all sides. He was criticized by politicians, military generals, newspapers, and even members of his own cabinet. Some believed he was too weak to lead. Others believed he was too powerful. Few truly understood the burden he carried. Lincoln often worked late into the night, reading battle reports and long lists of casualties. He visited wounded soldiers in hospitals and personally wrote letters to grieving families. The war aged him rapidly. His face grew tired, his posture heavier, and his eyes carried the weight of a nation at war. Yet through every loss and every setback, he remained committed to preserving the Union. He believed that democracy itself was being tested, and that failure would mean the end of government by the people. In 1863, Lincoln made the most consequential decision of his life. He issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring freedom for enslaved people in Confederate states. This decision transformed the Civil War. It was no longer only about preserving the Union. It became a moral struggle for human freedom. The decision was dangerous and deeply controversial. Many Americans opposed it. Some threatened his life. But Lincoln believed that history would judge him not by safety or popularity, but by moral courage. As the war slowly came to an end, Lincoln did not speak of revenge. He spoke of healing. In his second inaugural address, he urged Americans to rebuild the nation with compassion and humility, famously saying, "With malice toward none, with charity for all." He dreamed of a future where former enemies could live together as one nation again. That future would never fully be realized under his guidance. On April 14, 1865, just days after the Civil War effectively ended, Abraham Lincoln attended a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. That night, actor John Wilkes Booth assassinated him. Lincoln died the following morning. The nation was plunged into shock and grief. Millions mourned the loss of the man who had guided them through their darkest chapter. Abraham Lincoln did not live to see the full impact of his actions, but his legacy endures. He proved that greatness can rise from the poorest beginnings, that repeated failure is not the end, and that moral courage can change the course of history. His life remains a powerful reminder that true leadership is not about power or fame, but about responsibility, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to humanity.